I am going to get that video up and live now. So hopefully you will be coming on board any minute now, Marie. Just connecting. There we go. Hi. So it's great to have you on, and thank you for joining us all the way from Chicago.
My pleasure. Good morning, Elizabeth. Good morning, Mom.
Hi, well, it's afternoon for us.
Right? I forgot. That's right. You're several hours ahead.
We are indeed, but it's great to have you on board finally, because it's been a long time since we've been chatting, maybe 4 years now. So it's good to have you on the Instagram. So for those of you that are listening and don't know Marie, you're in for a treat. Because she is the most incredible lady. I mean, she's not only an internationally published author, but she also used to model, and now is a huge advocate for models and their model rights, and has Boss Babe Models, which is an agency that actually sort of like trains and advocates and helps, and she speaks to various people about rights. So if you've got a question after this, that's the time to ask her, because she knows everything. So hang in there for the questions afterwards. But meanwhile, let's get to our first question, which is basically how you got into this. I mean, when you started, did you always want to be a model? What was your trajectory? And by the way, Marie found Cindy Crawford, so she's got a great eye on top of everything else. So tell us your story.
Well, the quick version is that my mother was a model before she met my dad. But, this is way before I was even born, and I was born in 1958. Wow. So the point being is that my mother was actually the one that introduced the concept to me as a child. And she was a community activist and was doing fundraisers, and those fundraisers were fashion shows. And she would put me into those fashion shows, and I'd be walking down the runway as a little toddler. So that's really how it got started.
How young were you then? How young were you?
Literally like 6, 7, 8
wow.
years old.
Because that was very young. I mean,
that was way before what the industry is now, right? That was just like neighborhood fun stuff. So that's how I got started. And if you flash forward, we'll forget all that years in between. But if you flash forward, then when I moved to Chicago, eventually I got a job running the studio of who was then a top fashion photographer, Stan Malinowski. Excuse me. And working for Stan, producing his photo shoots worldwide. I'd go to Rome with him. We'd shoot 10 days with all the Italian designers. And meaning we would be shooting all of the editorials, all the fashion.
You were modeling for him?
No. I was producing.
Oh, you were in the studios, right? Yeah. Okay.
I'm trying to compress a lot of years.
Yes, sure. I imagine you were just sort of like, found, the normal trajectory of like somebody meets you, you're found as a model, and then you go into modeling. But obviously you're working back. So you started as very young as a kid, then went backstage, and then, wow, yes, okay.
Yes, I much prefer being backstage because I like telling the models what to do instead of being told what to do.
It's hard.
Yes.
It's a hard work. It's really hard work. People underestimate actually how difficult it is to be a model.
There's the kind of pressures, and I don't know if we're going to get into it, but the kind of pressures with body image and keeping a hip a certain width was very important to the industry, and I found that conflicting with my mental health. So that's really, as I got into being a teenager in young 20s, that's really why.
And what decade are we talking about? 80s, 90s?
Let me see, 70s.
Wow, okay.
Into the very early 80s. So I got my job working with Stan Malinowski in 1983. So that's where I professionally went backstage, right? So I was traveling essentially around the world with Stan, producing all of his fashion photo shoots, whether it be Europe, and then we'd go to New York, we would shoot a cover of Vogue, and then we'd come back to Chicago and shoot a week of what was called then catalog. where a client's like, I don't know if you have over in England, but it's a client called Sears, which is
Yes.
okay, good. So you understand it's not really couture. It's more everyday kind of people next door kind of attire. So the point being is that I got an extreme education in going from Rome, shooting with Valentino, the designer, to going to New York, shooting a cover of Vogue, to coming back to Chicago and shooting catalog. Extremely different clientele, extremely different models, actually.
Yes, yes.
And so that's really how I got my eye. Thank you for the compliment about my eye, but was really working for Stan and working with all the top models and the designers that my eye would be trained for the business. And
how did you find Cindy Crawford? How was that? Tell us that story.
So I was working for Stan Malinowski, and he had been booking this amazing model by the name of Gia. So I don't know how many people are going to remember Gia, but she was a huge model, tons of Vogue covers. But sadly, she passed away as a result of her heroin addiction.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And so that's a sad
story. Did they make a film about her?
Yes. Yes. And Angelina
Yes, it was Angelina Jolie.
Yes.
Amazing movie. Amazing movie. So that was, you were working with her. Wow. That's extraordinary.
So Stan was booking Gia for his photo shoots. And then I got to edit the film, which is so fun. But again, it was my eye was being constantly trained. And I just had a preference for more exotic looking models. Not that blonde, blue eyes aren't pretty, but I just like the exotic ones. So the point being, around the time that Gia would pass away was around the time that I would then become an agent, and I would discover Cindy Crawford. To answer your question, that I discovered Cindy Crawford, I was interviewing a makeup artist. I was working for a very tiny agency at the time called Stewart Talent. And it wouldn't be for a year later that my boss, Jane Stewart, would merge with John Casablancas, and we would then become Elite Chicago. But it was at the Stewart Talent Agency that I had found Cindy in that makeup artist portfolio.
Wow.
George, and I asked George about Cindy, and he says, oh, forget it. She doesn't want to model because she's already been turned down by all the other agencies because of the beauty mark. And I said, I think that's what makes her look so interesting. Please help me. And he did help me track her down through the photographer, Scott Weimer, who had shot the images in George's book. And so it wasn't an overnight success because keep in mind, this was the early 80s. And the whole exotic looking girl was not very popular.
It was blonde, blue eyes, wasn't it?
Yes.
It was very blonde, blue eyes. I remember that era really, really well because actually my sister's blonde and blue eyes. So everybody wanted so I totally get that. So that's so interesting. So Cindy Crawford was definitely not the kind of, you know, she was, you sort of like saw her as something different and should be.
Completely.
Yeah.
And by the time she got to New York, people were calling her the baby Gia.
Really?
Yeah, because she was that stunning. I mean, she was that stunning then and still clearly even amazingly. She's aged so beautifully, it's ridiculous.
But you know this as well, Marie, that it's not just about looks, is it? Because it has to be a lot about, you know, not just the way you're looking, but the way you're moving. It's the way that the camera loves you. That's really what makes you, you know, become the better model. You know, that's what makes you more than everyone else. So she must, not just her good looks and her exoticness, it was more. It was the fact the camera loved her. And that's, yeah.
Well, keep in mind, if you go back to her history, when I started her, she was a 16-year-old in high school, and she was still class valedictorian. She was getting high grades, class valedictorian, modeling downtown Chicago, commuting back and forth from the suburbs. She took it very, very seriously at an early age. And this is what you teach. This is what I teach. It's all about business. This is a business, and you have to take care of the business component of the entertainment business, right? So she was always taking care of her money. She was taking care of her body, her skin, her studies. Like she had been given a, well, she earned it, but she had been given a scholarship to Northwestern University in chemical engineering. And so
Wow.
that's how she started. But the reality was she was making so much money as a model, she had to make that difficult decision to walk away from her academia to focus on her modeling because, you know, after so many Vogue covers, at some point you're like, oh, okay, maybe I can do this for a living.
Yeah. So for those of you that are joining late, we were just talking about Cindy Crawford, but yes. So that's very interesting. And does she sort of like recognize you now as somebody who sort of found her and sort of, you know, does she
Yes,
like
as a matter of
tracked her
fact, I was
down?
so touched. A couple years ago, she produced this incredible book called Becoming Cindy. It's this astonishing what's it called? Coffee table book
Yes,
published by
yes,
Rizzoli. Yeah,
yes.
and in that book, she thanked me for
Oh, that's so
discovering her.
Oh, that's great. Isn't it great?
Yeah, so then I wrote her a thank you note for thanking me, and she wrote me back a note saying, it was my pleasure to share our journey together.
Oh,
like,
that's
see,
really...
that's a good businesswoman all these years later, and she's still being like very grounded, very down to earth, and very kind and loving.
So we'll probably get into that because that's a question that we're going to ask later is kind of, you know, in this time of COVID, how do you feel that we should upskill? And I'd imagine that part of what you're going to say is, you know, make sure that the business side of what you're doing is, you know, your top of your game, you know, exactly what you're up to, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But right now, just one more question I wanted to ask you before we get to that one is, you know, everyone that I've been speaking to in the industry, they get to a point where, you know, their mental or sorry, I've gone somewhere. Their mental or physical health seems to suffer somewhat. And, you know, they suddenly realize, gosh, you know, either I've put on weight, and it's not necessarily about models, I mean, casting directors, photographers, makeup artists, you know, they're relentlessly going and going and going, as well as the model, by the way. So the model might find they've lost weight, for example, but they might also find that their mental health is suffering. So did you ever have that? Did you ever come to a moment where you just thought, oh my goodness, I've worked so hard on doing what I'm doing that I've somehow let everything else go? And when you did, how did you get back again? You know, do you have a story about that? Because obviously later we'll be talking about tips and stuff like that, but we're just talking about your journey at the moment.
Well, Elizabeth, I'm 61. And
you look amazing.
Well, thank you.
You're doing something right.
I was kind of stressing out, like, because during COVID, I haven't been to a hair salon in 2 months. So I'm like,
looking
oh my
good.
God, am I going to be able to look cute for the camera for Elizabeth? I was so worried. So thank you. So in answer to your question, I have 16 years of sobriety. So that right there shows you that if I was a drug addict and alcoholic and I felt compelled to get clean and sober, there was clearly some trauma issues that had started very young in my life, which were the consequences. And my answer, the consequences to the trauma that I sustained was to drink and drug and smoke cigarettes, right? So it wasn't until much later in life that I decided to get clean and sober. So to answer your question, I've had mental health issues my entire life, and getting clean and sober was my initial solution. But it's a constant daily struggle for me. And I say this because I take on so much, because not only am I managing 10 of my own models as a mother agent, and I'm coaching them through their mental health issues, but then I do one-on-one coaching where anybody can hire me to help them with their career. So now I'm listening to their mental health issues. But
do you find that, I mean, because it sounds like, do you find that the model industry actually causes the health issue, or do you find that people that are driven to this industry are in themselves people who are highly just, you know, have high emotions?
I think that's a superb question. And I think that it's not a simple answer, but since this is an Instagram live, I'll just try to get to the point and share that it's a creative industry, and creative people generally are very, very sensitive people, and highly susceptible to the environment that they're in. And we're drawn to the creative arts, and we're very highly intelligent in many ways,
yes,
but then not so much common sense in some other ways. And so my point being is that I've had a total of 23 friends commit suicide.
wow,
And only 3 of them were not in the business. So the industry, I think, kind of exacerbates whatever kind of problems you might be having. For example, if you take a 16-year-old, and now, thank God, through education and rules being changed and laws being changed throughout the world, things are getting a little better with models being protected. But let's say you take a very young person. Let's call her 18, right? So she's old enough to travel and work in all the markets. She's 18 years old, and now she's being thrust into an environment of people telling her to take her clothes off, telling her that her hips need to be smaller, telling her, what to do. And essentially she becomes a lemming, where she's just doing what everybody tells her to do, because she doesn't have enough self-confidence or enough advocacy in her life to understand that she can say no to certain things, right? So she can tell the agency, I'm tired, I'm booking out on Friday, I need that time out.
yeah,
Or telling the agency, I need a financial statement, right? I want to know what the deductions are happening in my account.
yeah.
Like, they don't realize that they can
Business
speak
side.
up. Yes.
Yep. The business side, going back to that business. Finance, is the pivotal point for almost anything, because if you're financially insecure, you become easily malleable, which means that you're easily manipulated.
Yes.
So if you don't know where your money is coming from, you don't understand what's being deducted and how much is being deducted each time you get your statement in, it makes you very vulnerable. And this is and people that are vulnerable actually end up with mental health issues, because you have no ground, you have no stability, you can't, the rug is easily pulled from underneath your feet. So those sort of things, in finance, starts finance, which is why models that are listening right now should really take care of, finance, as a first step, and business as a first step.
Absolutely.
So Leila is asking a question about, what would your advice be for someone who has already mental health issues and now thrown into this industry? Do you think it will have a greater negative effect?
Well, I'd say, not knowing, there's not a one size fits all answer about mental health, right? That's a whole big conversation. But let me say this: proceed with caution is my first answer. And something I haven't mentioned, which I think is absolutely critical, and this is going to sound crazy, but taking self-defense classes, taking martial arts classes, gives somebody a sense of physical empowerment. And also taking martial arts, it teaches
and
you
mental, mental strength.
And also, in what I train in Chicago at Chicago Fitness Center, is called Shidokan, which is a Japanese martial art where the voice, or the kiai, your warrior cry, is very important. So we're taught
Love
to,
it.
and I don't
Love
want to scream into the phone, but it's like,
you're gonna scare me.
Right. Well, that was being quiet. So the point being is that we're trained, our voice is very important. So it's like a metaphysical experience. So as you're training in a dojo and learning how your warrior cry is so important, when you're in a studio situation and there's a predator coming towards you, if they're, I'll just give a simple example. If you know that they're coming close to you and all you have to do is slam your forehead against their nose as hard as you can, they won't do that ever again.
But I like the idea of the warrior cry, because the warrior cry, it's like a feeling that, in a situation where basically you use your body and you don't use your voice, and actually you're practiced more at not speaking, because your job is to actually move your body more than use it. The fact that you have this warrior cry, suddenly it becomes primordial. You know, if you feel threatened, you can suddenly use it if you need to, which actually is quite important, because actually all of us need to do that. Sometimes I found myself in a situation, I found myself unable to verbalize. And you suddenly realize actually the power of voice is very important. So the more you can do with that, the better.
Yeah, so
I like
so
that advice.
It gives you two skills essentially, as you were just referring. It gives you the voice, and it also gives you the physical capability of if somebody's not paying attention to what you're saying, right? Now you can drive home the point.
Yes, exactly. So no, I like that. I like that a lot. I like that a lot. So moving forward, sort of like, because I mean, it sounds like, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because the sort of mental health challenges that go on, and then the physical challenges. So for example, making sure that you're eating well, you know, making sure that, you know, you've got a healthy diet, and you understand what good health is. And then, you know, moving on from, do you have any tips, by the way, on health, on sort of food health, or sort of, you know, how to mentally, you know, understand your challenges and be able to resolve them easily yourself? Do you have any tips for anybody?
Well, two thoughts. One, everybody has a different body. Even twins would have to work out often differently because their bodies are made up of different compositions, right? So the important thing is that each human being finds what works for them specifically, number one, right? And that includes their mental health. For example, me with cardio, I need cardio or else I get super depressed. I need my martial arts or I get super depressed. And since I've been in this era with COVID, I have been horribly down. Well, also, two of my best friends died last month in Chicago as a result of COVID, right? So, like, for me, this has been a hugely challenging situation. And I've gained probably about 10 pounds, but I've been paying attention. So that's very important, like paying attention to, okay, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? And am I allowing myself some compassion and patience? And okay, I'm grieving. So if I need to turn to peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, then that's what I'm going to do. But also I'm speaking with my therapist weekly. So I think it's very, very important that people find kind of their sanity,
their balance. Yeah. So I think the learning in this is that know yourself, because everyone is different. So Layla is asking about balance and motivation and about health and about her situation. And I think in everything you have to know who you are first and why you're suffering, because often we have these mental challenges because of something that is happening to us. So work out what your driver is first, what's getting you to that, to behave badly, if you like.
Yeah.
And then try and focus on the thing that is actually the problem, rather than, you know, the thing that is making you feel better while ignoring the thing that is actually the problem. So sometimes it's like running away from a shadow. Face your shadow. You know, the shadow is always bigger depending on where the moon is or the sun is. Just, you know, so focus on that. So I think that's a really good point. You know, find out what it is, your driver, and then work out your challenges from there. So moving to the next question, we're going to ask, you know, like during this time of COVID, there are a lot of people that are shut down. They're in their homes and they're thinking, yikes, don't know how the model industry is going to look like. How am I going to be relevant? So how do you think that models can upskill during this time, given that COVID will probably change the industry? How do you move forward with that? What's your advice?
I don't know if you've covered this in any of your other posts or Instagram Live, but there, to me, you know, you were talking about the shadow. I learned many years ago, training in quantum physics with this awesome coach, Austin Vickers, where he was teaching me to look into the darkness to find the light. And in this situation in COVID, with my struggle, with my depression, not being able to train in my martial arts dojo and not being able to go to the gym and do my cardio, not being able to run outside because we have to be wearing masks in Chicago. Like, that's a huge challenge.
Yeah.
So in this situation, relevant to your question, it's a perfect time to be creative. It's a perfect time. Like, people are talking about how bored they are. I'm like, how could you be bored? I don't have enough time in the day. So to answer your question, like, I've been working with my models that I manage, right? Doing Zoom or FaceTime or Skype or whatever. And either I'm having a conversation with them and their parents or them and their boyfriend. But the industry, as you said, it has changed drastically. And this is a time to be creative and to have fun. For example, now technology is being used in a way that we never used it before. For example, let's say a client in London can be on a Zoom call with a model in Los Angeles, and that client can be having the model measure herself, right, on Zoom, and to show that client, to prove to that client that her hips are literally 34 inches, right?
Wow.
Now, the agency is the one that, created that opportunity and made that connection, because a professional model who has a mother agency under contract should be arranging that. That's the professional way to go about it. But what's happening now, what's really fascinating, there's this term called create from home, where now clients are sending merchandise to the models at home, right? With very specific guidelines of their aesthetic, their brand aesthetic, and how that model should be shooting that merch in their house, or if they're going on location. So a lot of the models are having to put together these location presentations, right?
Yes.
So for example, my model Tristan is in Los Angeles. So he's got the beach, he's got the parks, he's got all sorts of fun little like flower gardens. So he has to go around and take all these pictures so that the agency can send those to the client. So then the client can take their brand aesthetic and figure out, okay, how can we book Tristan in his environments? And then who's going to shoot Tristan?
Yeah.
So then it becomes, is Tristan shooting with a remote control? Is it Tristan's dad that's shooting Tristan with dad's camera?
But it brings up an interesting question, because actually then, Tristan, let's say we take Tristan as an example. Tristan shoots, okay. So what actually happens to those photographs? Who actually owns them? Because and then does he get paid for the styling and for the photography, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Or does he just get paid as a straight model? And then what's the deduction from that? Do they still get their 40% or whatever it is from, So how does that actually all work?
Okay. There's so much to talk about just in that question. You have amazing questions, but I'm sorry, not every question has like just a black and white, here it is answer.
I know. I'm sorry, because I know we're time limited as well.
Yeah. So anyway, to answer your question, we have never been in this situation. So everybody is just pivoting the best that they can to try to make as much money as they can, meaning the agencies and the models and the clients.
Yeah.
Because we're still where we were months ago, where merch needs to be shot. They need models. They need the agencies to book the models, right? So everybody is learning a new way, for at least for now, for the next couple of months.
But it's still about being super smart. So the models that are listening, don't think, just because brands have sent you some clothes and stuff like that, be a little bit more, be really savvy with this. This is what you're saying, isn't it? Because this is a huge opportunity, because everyone is learning. So in fact, the slate is clean. So this is the time to demand, actually, because they can't do anything else, because the model is really frontline in this. They've become the photographer, the stylist, the ideas guy,
absolutely,
person on the ground. So therefore, demanding is this is the time. This is the time.
And that's where the agent comes in, or the booker inside of the agency that does that negotiation.
Right.
And so again, as a business person, the booker could call the model or send an email or text or whatever and say, here's this opportunity for this booking. Yes, you're going to have to do your own hair and makeup. You're going to have to light it. You're going to have to do everything. However, this is the rate. do you want it? And the model can easily say, no, thank you. But
it's a nice time also for agents, isn't it, to negotiate before for their models, because they might be able to negotiate more for the model at this point. Because as you say, you know,
it just depends. Not to be Debbie Downer, but the reality here in America is that we have 3 major fashion clients that have just claimed bankruptcy. We have J. Crew, we've got Saks Fifth Avenue, and Neiman Marcus. So, you know, everybody, well, just making a general statement, everybody is kind of sitting in fear right now, and fear of not being able to pay their bills. Like, it's going to be fascinating to see in several months, like how many modeling agencies are still open, because the owners of the agencies have to keep their staff, right? So they have to keep their staff on staff, even if it's booking these bookings remotely. I know of some agents who had to essentially put their staff on furlough here in America, and then those agents then are claiming unemployment because the agency owners just couldn't afford to keep the agency open. So it's like, it's kind of a chaotic time, and slowly but surely we're going to start experiencing a pace, because even the agencies, like, what's going to happen from the safety component once the agents go back to work themselves, like in the office. Are they going to have to wear masks? Is the agency owner going to have to separate desks? Are they going to have to put up those clear sneeze shields so that people, you know what I mean? Like, people aren't even back in their offices yet, so we don't know what's going to happen. I'm trying not to blither on, but there's just so many aspects to that discussion.
Well, we've got a question from Alicia, who said, please, can you speak to the importance of what a model picks on Instagram? Not quite sure what that means, but do you mean?
Well, I think that's a superb question, and it's funny because just a couple of weeks ago, I did a 2-hour free webinar on that exact conversation.
Wow.
And really, it just comes down to, what is your brand? Who are you? Right. And me, I am, as a model advocate, I'm much more family friendly. So I'm always trying to encourage models not to sexualize themselves and do anything that would compromise their career, their integrity as a human being, their family's reputation. What happens if they go to apply to college, or maybe 10 years from now, what's going to happen when they go try to get a corporate job? You know, once it's out there on the internet, right, there's no taking it back. Like, you can delete it off your phone. But
so I think, actually, you know, Instagram is your portfolio. Whatever you want to say about yourself, put it out there. I mean, says, you know, speak it from the client point of view, but actually this is, I think what Maria's trying to say is, this isn't about the client, actually. This is about you projecting yourself, and the client then picking you because of your character. And I think, you know, it's interesting, because I spoke to a casting director live a couple of weeks ago, and I said to him, what do you think you should, what advice would you like to give the models during this time of COVID? And he said, you know what, when I was being a casting director, you know, every time I cast, I would always speak to the models in advance. The reason being that I needed to know what their personality was like. I needed to know what hobbies they had, what they felt, you know, in their hearts, because then I could pick them for the clothes. I understood how they were going to move and feel good about those clothes. And I think people kind of miss that character is very important. It's not just about what you look like. Character and business.
Absolutely.
That's what Maria's saying.
Yeah. Yeah, and because it's all about brand alignment.
Yes.
So if you are hypersexualizing yourself in all the posts that you're doing on a daily basis, and in your stories and in your Instagram live and in your highlights, and you have a client that is not about a sexualized type of brand, they're not going to book you.
Yeah.
And in America, we are making a general statement, we are relatively conservative.
Oh, you've gone.
Our client, are you still there?
Yes, sorry, it's sort of like
Okay,
wearing
I'm
type.
sorry, something happened on my end with the.
Uh, it's going a bit. I think we might have lost Marie a bit, but I think basically Marie is saying she's gone a bit slow, but basically saying that personality is very important, business is very important, to run yourself like a business is very important. And during this time of COVID, if you really want to upskill, those are the things that you really need to do to push yourself forward, and make it the best career that you can have when this time is finished. Um, I'm not sure we're going to get you back, Marie. I think that there is a problem. So I think at this point, unless you want to hear me go on and on and on, which I'm sure you don't, end this session. But it's been great. It's been great having you guys on. And if you have any questions actually for me at the moment about health or anything like that, let me know. So there's a question, what's the best way to find opportunities in quarantine? So I think, the best opportunities you've got at the moment is if you've got an agency, I would keep up with that agency. Just keep, tapping in, saying hi, find out really what your values are. This is a really good time to sort of like, find out what kind of character you have. Do you feel comfortable, with smoking cigarettes and being with alcohol, or do you feel uncomfortable with fur or whatever it is? Find out what your boundaries are. This is a really good time for that. What advice do you have on how to grow your brand and figuring out what your brand actually is? I mean, it's a very good point. So you should test yourself. Think about yourself in 3 years' time, and imagine if you saw a photograph of yourself with a tattoo, with sort of like smoking cigarettes. I'm just going to see if I can get Marie back. And think of yourself, if you found yourself in 2 years' time, if you'd feel comfortable wearing fur, if you do want to sort of like have animal rights, that sort of thing. So just be conscious of yourself, find out what your character is. Thank you for doing the live. Love, Marie. Oh, she's great. You just got a huge compliment for somebody. They love you. But you're back. So if you've got any more questions, ask Marie. But I think, the thing was sort of like, we were asked the question sort of how to find character. What is character? How to find it? How do you massage your career? If you have any advice for people that are asking those questions, they're here to listen.
That's a superb question. And I think for sure it starts at home. Can you guys hear me okay? Because it's really funky on my end.
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Okay, thank you. So you're completely blank on my end. But anyway, it starts at home. And I know that sounds really old school, but it's like, okay, what have your parents taught you? And thankfully in my world, my parents taught us a lot about standing tall and being proud and hard work ethic and taking care of your community. And my mother being a community activist, that's where I got into model advocacy, right? So I was trained that way. My father was a rocket scientist at NASA.
Wow.
During the Apollo Moon program.
Wow.
So can you imagine being a kid? Can you please shut that off, Suzanne? Sorry, my sister is here and she's got her phone on and it's bleeping and I'm getting distracted. So anyway, with my father putting men on the moon, that taught me about there is absolutely no ceiling to what I could or I couldn't do in life. So it goes back to your family and how your family raised you. And then if you didn't have the privilege of being raised with character, with family of character, then that's a skill, just like learning makeup. Yes. Or, how to do martial arts. You have to learn character and that takes time. It's not like you can just go into a store and buy it. You need to develop it.
And I think that's why it's so difficult. They ask models, you know, to start modeling at 13 and 14 years old and expect them somehow to have a character and be all sorted out. And then, by the way, navigate this very, very adult world where high sexualized, you know, you're in this kind of atmosphere which is fairly abnormal anyway, you know, and navigate that. I mean, it's difficult. It's really, really difficult.
That's where we as model advocates come in. That's how we help.
Yes, that is exactly. So Marie, you really are amazing. I must say that I think that the models that you have under your guidance at Boss Babe Models are extremely lucky. And for anybody listening to this, you know, you should get hold of Marie and think about doing the, you know, a course with her, having her under guidance, because she really does have the most extraordinarily good advice.
Well, thank you.
Listen, no, genuinely. I mean, I think it's fantastic. And you obviously have it in your heart. And I think that's part of the advocacy, part of the character we were talking about before. And I love the fact that your father was putting people on the moon. I mean, how great is that? Yeah, fantastic. So look, if anybody has any more questions, let us know. Otherwise, I think we're going to wrap up in a minute. But it's been incredible talking to you. I really think that you're inspirational in the genuine sense of the word. I think that you know, your business is extraordinary. I think your life has been extraordinary. I think what you've done with your life has been exceptional. You know, you haven't sat on your ass. You've done so much. So, I mean, huge congratulations. And thanks so much for being part of this and about helping everybody. We've got one more question. What's the best way to go about continuing to try to find an agency from home? What would you say?
Oh, well, that's regardless of COVID and non-COVID, you do it through, God, all the agencies are doing model searches right now. So you can DM them through Instagram, or you can go to the agency's websites and then follow the directions there on the specific kind of digitals that they want you to submit. So don't submit what you think are good photos that are covered with all sorts of filters. I can't tell you how many times models send me photos with Bambi filters or, you know, little Valentines circling their heads. Like, no, digitals. Basically, well lit, what look like passport photos. We're not looking for a production.
If they get asked, yeah, and they've got to be careful about scamming too, haven't they? Because, you know, you can get scammers out there that charge money and stuff like that, and that's like a no, isn't it?
No, stay with the legit agencies, and you can easily check on them by not only talking to other models, but you can also check their websites and their social media and see how they're posting. Are they of character? Like, that's a really important thing for a model to find. The agency that's going to support their character.
And we have another question about how can you stay consistent with creating content, especially during pandemic. Good thing, because, you know, it's very easy to run out of ideas sometimes when you feel limited.
Well, this goes back to why I was giving that 2-hour webinar, because the bio itself is critical, in which the person establishes who they are and who they are as a brand. For example, if you go to my Instagram, in the bio it says, coaching boss babe models how to become pro models with dignity and self-respect. Yeah. That immediately tells people who I am. When clients go to the model's Instagram, they want to know, do they dance? Do they sing? Do they do martial arts? Like, what is important to them? What are they advocates for? Are they a person of substance? Are they in?
Oh no, we've lost Marie again. She's having a real problem with her internet, which is such a shame, because she's giving the most incredible advice, you know, on how to stay.
In the bio, how important it is that you have to communicate to the client who you are in that bio. And that is one area that I see every day the models are losing out opportunity, because, like you were talking about with the casting director, when the agency or the casting director, any kind of clients go to your Instagram, they go to that bio and they want to find out, in that little baby resume opportunity, that little white space, and it's ideal that you have a business profile and not just a personal profile, because the business profile gives you more bio space. But they want to know what your skills are. What are you contributing to the shoot? Like, what kind of creativity? Because to answer the question about, you know, content, that bio, once you establish your brand and who you are, that then becomes your outline to how you post. Does that make sense? So if somebody is a martial artist, they're posting that. If they're into health and fitness, they're posting that. If they're a dancer, they're posting that also.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's kind of like what's in your heart. So you put out there what you want everybody to see. That this is my speciality. This is the sort of like where I feel comfortable. So, you know, if you're putting that out there, I mean, we've got another question about should you make it simple and fun, or should you make it, you know, all about your interest? I mean, I think that if you want to make it simple and fun, maybe that is your interest. Do you know what I mean? Maybe you just want to be lighthearted, and that is also, isn't it? That's a character as well, you know. So,
I think to be authentic and to create a range of what you can do and not make it so overcomplicated. For example, this happens in America all the time with people of color. I will be coaching models who would have like 15 different hairstyles in their Instagram feed, which that confuses clients. And they'll be defensive and say, no, I'm showing versatility. And I'm saying, no, you're showing inconsistency. It's one thing to style the same haircut different ways. And it's another thing to have different colors of hair and different lengths of hair. Because most clients would just say, oh, that's confusing. I don't want to book that person. Am I making sense in the sense that there has to be...
Gosh, I hadn't really thought about that. That's amazing. I didn't really think that would be an issue, but that's really good advice.
And the other thing that kills me is when I'm coaching people who most of their posts are selfies. Like, how boring is that? I don't want to see 500 selfies of you with your duck lips posing in your panties in your bathroom. Like, that's boring. That is not creative. That is showing somebody has no ability to be diverse in their understanding of how to pose in front of the camera and how to put things together for photo shoots. I mean, this is a time to collaborate with other friends. And especially if you're in high school, you could be doing FaceTime chats with photographers, hairdressers, makeup artists to create all this content.
Yeah. So Marie, I'm sure everybody out there wants to get in touch with you afterwards and ask you more questions. So how do they get in touch with you?
Through Instagram. My profile. Marie.
So through Instagram, for Boss Babe Models, through Instagram, reach out to Marie.
Marie P. Anderson or Boss Babe Models, either Instagram. I'm the one. I'm the one that does my own social media.
Well, good. I think you've given really, really amazing advice, and I'm sure everybody who's been listening to it just thinks that it's really gems. They are gems too, because they are what makes or breaks talent. So,
well, it's my pleasure. I love to teach.
Well, thank you, and maybe we'll do it again.
Yes, please.
But thank you very, very much. It's been fantastic having you on, and we'll be in touch.
I'd like
Bye, everybody. Thank you for joining and listening. Bye.
Bye.